Every road has a tale to tell. On these, it's one horror story after another. Built in remote and improbable places. Dangerous and deadly. Each has its arsenal of deadly surprises. Most travel these roads out of necessity. Some come for the thrills. Others just made a wrong turn. To those who experience the nightmare firsthand, they are all roads from hell. At 15,000 feet above sea level, stretching 50 heart-pounding miles, is a thin gravel line between life and death, where over 100 people die every year. Driving it even once defies logic. Pedro Ciarico drives it every day.
Este camino es considerado como uno de los más peligrosos.
This is Bolivia's Camino de las Yungas, or as it's known locally, the Road of Death. It's the only way to reach the villages along the Yungas, which leaves the 100 or so travelers who make the journey each day with no other choice but to risk their lives. Most leave the driving to the professionals. It's a journey through harsh terrain and hairpin curves with sheer drops of thousands of feet. Snaking along a road that's only 15 feet wide, it's like walking a tightrope high up in the Andes. This morning, Pedro's got a dozen passengers in his charge.
Estamos entrando al lugar llamado la Curva del Diablo.
It's one of the most challenging spots on the road. One wrong move here spells disaster.
Unos 15 a 20 vehículos grandes. Después de mucho tiempo, ahí mismo dentro de los vehículos a las personas ya en forma de esqueletos.
It's a 3-hour nerve-shattering journey, so bus drivers work in teams. Today, Pedro's co-driver is Modesto Solis.
Necesariamente tenemos que tener el cambio de choferes cada 2 horas, ¿no? Para dar seguridad al pasajero y que el chofer también vuelva a concentrarse nuevamente. Un pequeño descuido es para que haya un accidente.
The Bolivian government used prisoners of war from Paraguay to build the road in the early 1930s during a 3-year war between these neighboring countries. Some say this road is the prisoners' revenge.
Un día que yo iba manejando por detrás de un camión, una parte de un peñasco, un derrumbe, se cayó sobre encima del camión. Y todos los pasajeros que estaban encima fallecieron, murieron. Una desgracia terrible para la gente que viajaba en el camión.
With one of the highest death tolls of any road in the world, the worst accident so far was in 1983 when a packed bus drove off the edge. René Toro is still haunted by that crash.
100 people died just in that accident. There were people from my town, from Coroico. I saw the corpses lie down, one beside the other, 10, 20, 30, 40 corpses under the rain. It's like a nightmare for me.
As if the road's not demanding enough, drivers have to be ready for extreme and unpredictable weather. Up to 50 inches of rain a year, and dense fog sweeps in without notice.
La peor condición es esta en la que estamos actualmente.
Retired bus driver Pablo Tapia drove the Yungas for over 20 years. Today he's a passenger, and he senses trouble ahead.
Es en el tiempo de lluvias. Generalmente se desprenden las peñas, el terreno se debilita.
¿Ya? 2, ¿ya? Esta parte es la más angosta.
Out of nowhere, there's a waterfall that wasn't here yesterday. The water's loosening the rock and gravel below.
Veremos un ratito, de repente vamos a montar esto. Habrá que abrirse hasta allá.
The drivers try to reinforce the road,
Se ha puesto algunas piedras, algún muro ahí para que se pueda pasar.
but this makeshift support is hardly stable.
Es probable que una de las ruedas, si pasa una rueda al aire, todavía la de adentro pisa la rueda, vamos a pasar. Caso contrario, resbalaría y todo el bus se volcaría.
With the passengers still on board, they carry on.
Vi a los amigos que estaban conduciendo el vehículo tratar de hacer algo con las piedras para que las llantas traseras, pero había corroído completamente el agua que cae en esa pequeña cascada el curso del camino, entonces era un poquito dificultoso.
The wheels are now mere inches from a 3,000-foot drop. There's no telling how slippery the road is, and with hardly any traction under the tires, it's a massive risk to drive any further. Another driver found himself in a similar situation in 2010 and lost his life. Their next move is critical. Making the wrong decision could turn this bus into a steel coffin.
Es mucha responsabilidad de tener la vida de los pasajeros en nuestras manos, ¿no? Entonces nosotros necesariamente tenemos que cuidar esas vidas, no comprometernos con accidentes que pueda haber con la gente que transportamos.
Modesto and Pedro have over 40 years of driving experience between them, and they haven't survived Yungas this long through wishful thinking. Backtracking on this road is a death-defying move in its own right, but today there's no other option.
Damos cuenta de que viajar esto ha sido una locura, ¿no? Ha sido un suicidio viajar por esta.
Today, these drivers choose the lesser of two evils and begin their long 37-mile journey home in reverse.
Volver a viajar por esa carretera me estremece el cuerpo. Prácticamente ya siento miedo.
Tomorrow they will try again, knowing full well this journey could be their last. Whether asphalt, rubble, or rock, each hell road has its own pitfalls. Dangers you don't see coming that can turn a Sunday drive into a mangled nightmare. In southeast USA, deep in the Appalachian Mountains, there's an 11-mile stretch of road twisting its way across the North Carolina-Tennessee border. Technically, it's part of US Highway 129. But around here, its jagged contours have earned it the nickname Tail of the Dragon.
We've seen quite a few accidents up here, and I've seen several die here on the road.
The Dragon has claimed 24 lives since the year 2000. Countless others have had scrapes with death. This memorial is a testament to all the carnage. Ron Johnson runs the Tail of the Dragon shop. He's a seasoned biker and knows this road better than anyone.
It's one of the most unique roads in the world. It has 318 curves and 11 miles. It's out in the middle of nowhere. There's no intersecting roads, no houses.
The Dragon used to be a Cherokee trail and was only paved in the 1930s. For decades, local residents and lost tourists were the only ones to brave this road. Then, in the 1990s, daredevils started flocking here from around the globe to test their driving skills.
The dangers are in the people that come here and don't know what they're doing. It takes concentrated riding and driving. You have to watch your braking. If you overbrake, there's a good chance you'll go off the mountain.
Even if you stick to the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, the hazards come thick and fast. There's Beginner's End, a hard right that comes up out of nowhere. The Whip, an uphill hairpin. And the Hump, also known as Gravity Cavity.
The curves just really never stop coming at you. There are very few straights.
Darrell Killboy Cannon used to ride this trail on his motorbike. Now he makes his living as a photographer.
It's pretty non-stop, and it's almost like a dance. You kind of get into a rhythm with it. The turns are fairly short duration, but very rapid. There are very few clearings along the sides of this road, so if you go off with any kind of speed, you're gonna end up in some trees, most likely. A lot of times people go off and they hit a tree the wrong way, and you know, it does fatal damage.
Snaking its way through forests and scenic spots, the Dragon can catch even the most skilled drivers unaware. Every one of the road's 11 miles has claimed at least one life. But mile marker 5 is the deadliest. In 2005, Darrell's wife, Laurie, had a blood-chilling encounter at that very spot.
It was a pretty day. I was on the bike and he was in the car. We're coming up on mile marker 5. Come around that blind right-hand turn. I saw the man and woman on the cruiser right in my lane, just trying to stop. And I remember, you know, just hearing the sound of the bikes hit.
Laurie knew the twists and turns of the Dragon, but on that day, nothing could save her from a near-death collision. Around the turn at mile 5, a couple on a motorbike cut the corner short at the exact moment Laurie was driving round it in the opposite direction.
I remember, you know, just hearing the sound of the bikes hit and then like blacking out. I come to, I'm cradling my left arm. I had just snapped both bones. Still have some numbness in some of the fingers, but I'm glad to still have my hand in the end.
Laurie and Darrell were so shaken by the crash, they will now only ride the Dragon by car. Not long after Laurie's accident, in almost the same spot, Ike Woodard crashed head-on into an 18-wheeler that was taking up 2 lanes. He ended up underneath the vehicle and died en route to the hospital.
Ryder really had no chance. I went up and looked at the accident scene after the fact. Just a split second that he had to react, and he laid the bike down and slid under the wheels.
There are more lorries on the road than ever before, because on the GPS, the Dragon looks like a shortcut.
And on the map, it just does not look like it's 318 curves and 11 miles. But once they get into it, there's no way to turn around. You really have to watch out for them.
It's almost impossible for large vehicles to stay in their lane, so every bend is a potential death trap.
The danger is if you meet one in the corner, their rear end is coming toward you. Twice I've been up in my car and had to actually put my right wheels in the ditch in order to avoid a truck coming at me, and they missed me by an inch. That's one you don't want to meet in a curve.
Even a small accident on the Dragon can turn into a life-threatening event.
The bad part about having an accident here is you're an hour from the hospital. If you have internal bleeding, you need to get to the hospital in 10, 15 minutes. It takes that long for the ambulance to get here or more, so there's a chance you're not going to make it.
Despite the high stakes, the speed junkies can't get enough of the Dragon. Most of them come for the adrenaline rush and the ride of a lifetime. However, 7,800 miles away, there's a hell road that a whole village relies on for survival. In eastern China, in a corner of the Hunan province, 6,000 feet up in the Taihong Mountains, a perilous passage. 1 mile long, 12 feet wide, 15 feet high.
This is a very dangerous situation when you have a road this size.
This is the Guyang Tunnel. At the top of the Taeyong Mountain is the village of Guyang. For centuries, the only link to the outside world was a narrow pathway snaking precariously up the steep cliffs. Perched as high up as 4 Empire State Buildings, trekking the path was fraught with danger. In 1972, 13 villagers decided to build a road. Without any training or help from the Chinese government, they used hand tools and basic explosives to complete the tunnel. It took them 5 years.
The fact that the villagers built this is amazing. But there was a necessity here. They were isolated from the rest of the world, so they needed some way to get people and goods from where their village was to the rest of China.
Among its many hazards are the 30 unreinforced openings, roughly chiseled out to dispose of debris. Then there's the oncoming traffic, the pedestrians, and the lack of emergency services.
What happens if there's something inside that creates a fire? Are there dangerous gases in the tunnel? Illumination, vision, sight distance. These are ways where accidents occur.
Although there have been reports of fatal accidents in the tunnel, no hard statistics are available. And so the Guyang Tunnel remains to the outside world a staggering, if mysterious, feat of amateur engineering. Traveling the world's hell roads is about far more than getting from A to B. Anything less than your full attention, and even the safest driver could find themselves praying for their lives. In southeast Utah, carved into the Cedar Mesa Mountains, in the middle of nowhere, lies a gravel path called the Moki Dugway. It looks innocent enough, but don't be fooled by appearances.
It definitely demands your respect. It has the potential to be a very deadly road.
This 3-mile stretch was built in the 1950s to transport uranium ore from the mountains to a nearby processing plant. Today, over 40,000 motorists a year travel through, most of them tourists, unprepared for what lies ahead. The Dugway is steep and prone to icing over. But it's the endless serpentine of switchbacks that can catch drivers out. Even sticking to the 5-mile-an-hour speed limit, it's easy to misjudge a turn and fly off the mountain. As part of the state highway system, Moki is regularly maintained. Lee Myers has worked this hell road for the past 16 years and knows how unpredictable it can be.
The weather varies quite a bit. It all has its own demands. Dry, powdery, dusty road to wet, flooding, rock slides. You never know what to expect every time you come up this road, and it can change quick.
The extreme conditions lead to erosion of the Dugway's surface. And when water and ice start to cleave the mountainside itself, boulders are loosened without warning.
Always worried, of course, about the safety of the public. We try to have good communications with the sheriffs so they can let us know what's kind of going on with our conditions.
Officer Marie Tuxhorn of the Bureau of Land Management regularly patrols the Dugway on the lookout for drivers who need help. Lying beyond reach, the metal carcasses are a constant reminder of just how hazardous these switchbacks can be.
There are some now historic wrecks that were never removed from the canyon here of people who just didn't make a corner. This particular corner here is the one that I would consider the most dangerous. So, as you can see, there have been tire tracks that have come over this edge. They have come clear out to right here. You can see the edge of the track there. As we look over this cliff edge, you can see one of the more serious wrecks that occurred here. It is a definitive clue that this road is as dangerous as people say.
Despite the numerous dangers, Lee Myers is out here whatever the weather, keeping the dogway clear in the ultimate machine, a 30-foot grader. But even this sturdy monster can't guarantee his safety.
4 years ago, giant rocks came down, rolled off the mountain, and smashed this whole front end in on the grader. I slid back about 20, 30 feet. It was really scary. It's the first time that's ever happened to me, but you have to be cautious and remember that this is a treacherous road. Things can happen in seconds.
Ferd Johnson was part of the team that built this road.
In the 1960s and 70s, they hauled uranium off of there, like maybe 20 or more loads of uranium a day into the Mexican Hat Mill. There's no guardrail. Just be careful and stay away from the edge.
Day after day, hapless tourists enter the dogway, thinking the only thing in store for them is a spectacular view. They don't realize until it's too late. This road is a death trap.
Some of the tourists that first initial contact with it is kind of spooky for them. They come down, hands on that wheel, and they don't look left or right, just right down the road. They don't know what's on either side of them. They just kind of petrified a little bit.
Sometimes you'll get someone who just calls in because they basically are scared to keep going. It's not that they have an injury or have an accident. They just didn't want to go any further. They're scared to go forward, they're scared to go backward, and they just stop.
It's not only tourists who drive in fear. Even the men who built this road have had hair-raising experiences.
A fellow named Richard Nielsen, and he come on top of the hill and got out too close to the edge, and it rolled off and rolled down I don't know how many times. He was trapped in the truck. There was a big boulder by the door and he had a hard time, and then the truck caught on fire.
No matter how well Lee Myers knows this road, he's never complacent.
I'm never comfortable. I may seem that way, but there's times that things happen in seconds and it can change for you. I'm gonna have to turn around right up here because this is getting too deep and too slippery for this truck. My family does worry about my well-being. They know what the Moki Dugway is. It is a dangerous road, so they do worry about me.
7,500 miles away in South Asia is an epic 800-mile highway that takes motorists to the top of the world and beyond. Slicing through the Himalaya mountains is the world's highest paved thoroughfare. Linking Islamabad to Kashgar, this monumental road is known locally as one of the wonders of the world.
We're now talking about the ultimate in dangerous roads.
This is the Karakoram Highway. It took the Pakistani and Chinese armies 20 years to build the road, and over 1,000 people died in landslides and rockfalls. As one of the region's main arteries, it connects hundreds of towns and villages, and up to 5 million motorists travel its treacherous heights every year. Reaching altitudes of 15,000 feet, Karakoram is as dangerous as it is spellbinding.
You're driving along this beautiful road, and what are you doing? Well, instead of actually paying attention to what's in front of you, you're looking over at the scenery, these beautiful mountains. And you have to understand that at any time, if you're not paying attention, that's when you're in trouble. There is no room for error. You're going off the side. As soon as you don't hit those brakes fast enough, you're pretty much dead. It doesn't matter if you have a seatbelt, airbag, doesn't matter. You're downhill at 3,000-4,000 feet. You're gone.
After the Rykot Bridge, things only get worse. 166 miles in and at an altitude of 15,000 feet, the road becomes too narrow for buses, so passengers have to continue the journey in off-road vehicles.
What makes this road particularly dangerous is that it's narrow, it's got a sheer cliff on one side, and it's got a sheer mountain on the other, so there's no room to maneuver.
As northern Pakistan's central highway, buses, trucks, and cars compete for space on the two-lane road.
This particular road is fraught with overcrowded buses. So you have buses that are moving at different speeds, carrying a lot of people. So one crash leads to multiple injuries.
With hardly any barriers or hard shoulders, vehicles skirt within inches of plunging ravines and the rushing Indus River.
Globally, 1.2 million people die every year on roads. That's about 3,000 deaths per day. People think that road crashes are accidents, that they're acts of God, but they're not. They're preventable. But as you can see, low and middle income countries, they often lack technical training to address the issues. Taking measures to improve visibility and reduce tight curves and hairpins, those are all important factors because they're a major cause of death in their countries.
Add to that tremors and earthquakes, and you can understand why it can take an hour to travel 1 mile and only a second to depart it. In Peru, up in the Andes Mountains, overshadowed by an extinct volcano, there's a 73-mile highway haunted by more than 100 lost souls.
Por la ruta Chacas, la gente arriesga su vida, ¿no? Para que llegue a su destino.
This is the Chacas Road. There's no other way to get from the city of Carhuaz to Chacas, so travelers risk life and limb making the journey.
Muchas veces he tenido temor de subir por la ruta Chacas.
As a police officer, Rafael Ibarra has seen it all, but Chacas is in a category of its own.
Hasta se me ha escarapelado el cuerpo de conducir por esta vía.
Today, he has to visit relatives in Chacas, so there's no avoiding the risk. His friend Omar does the driving.
Tenemos que ir despacio por acá porque ahorita no nos ayuda la neblina, las rocas, en consecuencia nos puede pasar algo.
Anything less than 100% concentration can lead to dire consequences. But if it isn't the drive that kills you, the mountain might. Huascarán, the highest peak in Peru, is an extinct volcano that still packs a punch. In 1962, a massive landslide devastated the villages below and killed 4,000 people. Then, in 1970, an earthquake dislodged an even bigger wall of rock and ice, which buried 2 towns and killed 20,000 people. There's still seismic activity here, which means anything can happen at any time.
Mira, ahí ves, mira.
Hay derrumbes, ¿ah?
Despacio, despacio.
There are 3 to 5 rock slides here every day, and one just struck.
Pon doble este, Omar. Pon doble.
Doble, mira la concha que la ruta se ha caído una rocaza acá, mira.
This could signal even more instability above.
La ruta ahorita está bien peligrosa y siempre derrumbes acá cada paso. Vivimos sano y salvo.
At some points, the road climbs to 13,000 feet. One slip is all it takes to plummet to certain death.
Hace 3 años atrás, un bus lleno de pasajeros, con 60 pasajeros, se ha volteado y se han muerto los 60. Y yo converso con mis familiares que no viajen por Chacas, porque es bastante peligrosa.
Creeping along the snow line, the weather can change in the blink of an eye.
Porque mucho cae nevado, que la lluvia total se tapa, por eso es como se llama, muy peligroso. Todo es
se hace cerro, no se ve la carretera, total enlutada.
In June 2011, Maximo Fuentes was driving the Chacas Road when his truck skidded out of control and crashed 100 feet into a ravine. Miraculously, he was pulled out of his vehicle with only minor injuries.
Acá sucedió en mi carro que, ¿cómo se llama? A 6 metros abajo se fue por motivo de lluvia, por motivo de la carretera. Cada que pasamos sentimos que nos está pasando igualito. Ese temor tenemos siempre, sí.
Rafael and Omar have reached the summit of Huascarán. It's considered a sacred spot.
Dice que pena, hay espíritus que penan por la mala muerte que siempre ocurre por acá, por accidentes de tránsito o algunos percances que pasa por acá.
Many believe the whole road is haunted.
Sí, hay comentarios de la gente que hay penan las personas, hay bullas, hay ruidos, hay silbidos. Eso es lo que comentan, ¿no?
In the mid-90s, priests placed a statue of the Virgin Mary above the road, where it could be seen by motorists.
Virgen es milagrosa. Acá pasaba accidente, mucho. Y desde el momento que pusieron la Virgen, se calmó total.
Crash survivors like Maximo visit the shrine and leave offerings.
Yo también varias veces he puesto las flores porque sí viajé de bajada y de subida. Yo doy la gracia a la Virgen.
As Rafael and Omar descend the mountain, they hope and pray that the Virgin Mary will secure their safe passage too.
Hay que ir siempre con fe, creyendo en ti mismo, ¿no? Con confianza, ¿no? Porque peor es cuando uno se vuelve, pues, nervioso. Estás con esos peores la ruta por acá.
Travelers along the Chacas Road are at the mercy of the mountains. 4,000 miles away, the same holds true for Colorado's Red Mountain Pass. But the Rockies' weapon isn't the landslide. It's a roaring white monster that can bury you alive. And the ultimate hell road where the tarmac itself is a war zone. Hidden in Colorado's Rocky Mountains lies a 25-mile road that's as intimidating as it is scenic. Built in the 1880s as a mining supply route, it's now traveled by more than 750,000 people a year, the only link from Ouray to Silverton and Durango. Steep grades, sharp curves, and precipitous drops are just some of the dangers that lie in wait.
The road itself is a ribbon. It's an asphalt ribbon that is extremely dangerous.
Welcome to Red Mountain Pass. This is a white-knuckle drive, even in perfect weather. As the elevation rapidly rises to 10,000 feet, motorists must navigate narrow lanes with no guardrails between them and a deadly plunge. And that's on a good day. On a bad day, it unleashes its deadliest weapon, the avalanche. On average, 25 people die in avalanches in the US every year, almost half on Red Mountain alone. Former avalanche forecaster Jerry Roberts has driven this highway hundreds of times and knows never to let down his guard.
When I drive Red Mountain Pass, when I think of hazard, I think of death, I think of beauty. It's a mixed bag. You get a lot of different weather conditions, you get a lot of different road conditions. These corners are pretty nasty, and oftentimes there's gravel and people drive off, drop down into the gorge. It's a very hazardous road year-round, just more so in the winter.
It takes an army of maintenance workers to keep this road clear, especially during the 7 months of the year when snow and ice descend on the mountain. Paul Wilson is one of them. He's spent over 2 decades fighting that battle.
This is the most dangerous road that I know of. The terrain, the avalanches, rock slides, mudslides, the sudden drop-offs.
Add loose gravel and a slippery surface into the mix, and people can easily careen over the edge. So Paul carefully monitors every square inch of the highway.
You've got to always be aware of where you are, what the conditions are. You got to be watching out for oncoming traffic. We've got animals. There's several things that we need to always watch for. It's a bit of a contradiction here. I mean, you got all this beautiful terrain and the skies, and then there's a lot of danger there that nobody realizes. I've pretty much seen it all up here on Red. I just have a lot of respect for this mountain.
But respect won't save your life if an avalanche lets loose. Not at speeds of over 200 miles per hour, with 15,000 pounds of pressure per square foot. So while Paul surveys the road, avalanche forecasters Ethan Green and Susan Hale carefully study the slopes above.
We monitor how the snow's coming in, how much weight's in it, how much wind there is, because the wind is going to move snow into the start zones where these avalanches release. And when we start to see enough of these indicators coming together, that's when we know we have to take action.
An effective method is to relieve pressure in the most densely packed areas using a process called mitigation.
Mitigation is throwing explosives out of a helicopter or shooting with a 105 howitzer or an avalancher to create a fracture and then a failure in that snowpack to get it to come down and to clean that path out.
Mitigation lowers the risk of a massive avalanche, but it doesn't remove it. In 1992, Danny Jaramillo and Eddie Immel were trying to clear the road after an avalanche when tragedy struck.
I was called in the middle of the night, and they said, report to the sheriff's department. Whoa.
These guys were outside the vehicle because they threw a chain on their plow, and they were both caught by a secondary slide. They did have an air pocket. They were alive for a long time.
Danny Jaramillo dug his way out 18 hours after being buried, and then Eddie died.
A memorial to colleagues and travelers who have lost their lives on the mountain serves as a tragic but necessary reminder of the dangers here.
It's pretty important, and I think it's a really good thing that they put this memorial up here for everybody that's been killed here, mainly the plow drivers. A lot of people stop and look at this. It helps put it in perspective to really realize what is down below.
The plow drivers are the true heroes of this road. They are underneath these paths more than anybody, so their chances of getting killed are much higher than the average person that's driving from Uray to Durango.
Paul is himself one of the lucky survivors. It's an experience that's hard to forget.
As I come around the corner, I mean, it's complete whiteout. I got too close to the edge, and I just rolled down. I ended up in the trees down there.
It was almost 20 years ago when Paul plunged 200 feet into thin air. Luckily, a patch of trees cushioned the fall. Trapped in his vehicle, he waited for what he thought would be certain death. Incredibly, 3 hours after the accident, a sheriff spotted the wreck and helped pull him out.
I hit a main artery in my arm here. I crawled up to here because I was having to hold that artery with my hand to keep from bleeding to death. You just want to be real careful when you're up here in them plow trucks. It can happen in just about anything.
Red Mountain Pass seduces drivers with its stunning scenery, but those who know it best never take it for granted.
I have fear every time I drive this road, so I drive with great paranoia on this road. It's dangerous. There will be another tragedy, and there's nothing you can do about it. So eventually, You know, I hate to say it, but the storyline is probably going to be the storyline of another tragedy.
Inside Afghanistan lies a spine-chilling 63-mile road. Built thousands of years ago, this route has been used for trade and travel in the rugged terrain of eastern Afghanistan. Much of the road is rocky, but that's not the real danger. Gunfire, roadside bombs, and ambushes earned the road its reputation as the Death Pass. As an important way of linking together the remote eastern part of Afghanistan to the rest of the country, the coalition forces have been paving the entire road, but not everyone welcomes their presence. Ancient tribal tensions and warlords fighting to maintain their power clash with foreign troops.
Here it's a different kind of environment. It's people shooting at you. You're not thinking about the pothole in front of you. You're thinking about what's around the turn here.
You don't have this normal road where you might have a problem, let's say, if you pay attention to your cell phone. No, you have to pay attention to what's coming up over that hill. You have to pay attention to whether or not an explosion just happened in front of you. You have to keep all your senses going all the time, and you're still driving fast. It must be almost impossible.
Everyone traveling along this ribbon of bitumen does so at great risk.
Well, we've had attacks from those hills over there. When we go up over the pass, we've had attacks on the mountain range to the far side over there they've operated from as well.
Lieutenant Colonel Rob Campbell knows KG Pass like the back of his hand.
This was a trouble spot for us because, you know, you can see if you're here, but you're not down there around the corner, the enemy's got you. You can't see what he's doing. He can set up ambushes. So, you know, it's a difficult position.
Different factions fight for control over this craggy but strategic region. With tensions running high, it doesn't take much for the situation to get out of hand.
It's an argument amongst the security force. But they're solving it through peace. You don't hear any gunfire. That's a good thing.
Until a lasting solution is found through peaceful dialogue, the road remains a battleground for the armed and angry.
There's no use in rebuilding this road only to have it blown up again after that. So I think in this particular case, the security has to come first. Otherwise, you're just going to be rebuilding this road for years and years and years.
Wherever roads meet nature, there's the potential for danger. Even in the safest vehicle, drivers face unpredictable conditions, fatal spinouts, and deadly plunges over the edge. The ground can suddenly give way. Snow can let loose. Every year, hundreds of passengers won't survive the ride. This is the terror of hell roads.